I'm not Pastor Sean, if you haven't figured that out already. He's not here tonight, and so he asked me to kind of fill in and just share my story as a way to just kind of let you guys get to know me better. If you don't know, if you're watching and you don't know, I'm Baylee Woody, and I am the worship pastor here. I just started beginning of last month, and I love it here. I love these people, and I just want to use this as a way to get to know everyone better and for everyone to get to know me better. So pray for me tonight. I'm scared. There's very few people that know the extent of my full story, and so this is a really big thing for me. So just pray for me tonight, and I would love if we could just all pray together right now as we start. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day, for this opportunity to gather together. I just ask that tonight, Lord, all that is said through me, Lord, it wouldn't be me, it would just be you. Lord, would you say what you want to say? Would you give me the words to say, Lord? I know that this story that you've given me has power in it, and I believe you've called me to tell others about it, and hopefully that will make others want to tell their story, and hopefully it will just bring people closer to you, Lord, and that's just my prayer, and that people would see you through me and through the way that I live my life and through the story that my life is, Lord, and I just pray that you would tell us all our stories, Lord, and lead us to share them as you desire for us to, Lord, and I just pray that your Spirit would be in this place, lead and guide me, protect us while we're here and as we leave this place and go about the rest of our week, Lord, and just thank you, and I praise you, and I give you glory and honor, Lord, and have your way in all of these moments, Lord. It's all yours. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know how many more opportunities I'll get to tell my story. I've kind of prayed and asked God, if you want me to tell it, give me the opportunity to do it. And I think he has given me a couple opportunities, and I've kind of pushed them away. Or maybe they just weren't the right places, the right time, but I feel like this is. And so I don't feel like this is coincidence that I was asked to do this. And so I'm really just going to start from the beginning and hopefully not take up too much time. But I just hope to say what needs to be said tonight and just ask you to stick with me through it. But starting from the beginning, I've grown up in church my whole life, really. Grew up in a small town in the Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia line. So I lived in Tennessee, but did life in Kentucky, went to church in Kentucky and everything like that. So I grew up in church. I started singing in church when I was in third grade. Even as a kid, I had a lot of anxiety over a lot of different things, but I remember one thing specifically. I was always scared that I wasn't saved. And so I would always ask Jesus to come into my heart, like every day probably. And so I was saved a lot, I guess you could say, but the first like public declaration, I think, when I was about 8 years old, in the old-fashioned Pentecostal church that I grew up in Kentucky, and just had a relationship with Jesus since I was young. Didn't always understand the extent of that or what that fully meant as a kid, but I knew I loved Jesus. I knew I loved to sing, and so that's what I did. And so with this relationship with Jesus that I had at a young age, as time went on, I started to experience things at a young age that most kids don't experience, and that's spiritual warfare. I remember the first moment that the war was waged in my mind, and it was about 11 years old, I think. A war was waged on my mind, and specifically a war was waged on my identity, and even more specifically a war was waged on my sexual identity and my sexuality. And the enemy would try to put lies in my head and try to make me think that I was something that I wasn't, and tried to make me believe the opposite of what I knew to be true about sexuality and what the Bible said and what I had felt in my heart and knew in my heart was true. And he just put these lies in my head, and I didn't really understand the full extent of what I was experiencing. But as I've grown older, I've come to realize that, I guess what you could call it, which I'm still learning about this specifically, but it's called intrusive thoughts. And the best way I know how to explain it is literally just thoughts that run across your mind that you don't want to have, or you don't even feel like they come from you. And in my case, I know they're not coming from God. And so it's just these bombarding thoughts, and kind of fast forwarding all the way to now. I go to Christian counseling, and it wasn't until really this past year or so that we kind of connected that it was attached with OCD. So bringing it back, I remember the first moment that I experienced it, and the enemy used that against me, and has used that against me really the entirety of my life. That's been the biggest battle that I've faced, and with that came just a lot of anxiety, and with those thoughts, it's attached with OCD, I just become so obsessive over it, and I know that it's not something that's coming from me or that's coming from God, but it's like I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from, and then I feel like I have to prove it wrong, but I don't, because I know it's a lie. But that has been the extent of probably my biggest struggle in my life, and that happened the first time when I was around 11 years old, and I've kind of battled with that the entirety of my life, but I still was in church, and I was still singing and serving and following Jesus as best as I knew how at that age. And then a few years later, when I went to middle school, some other stuff started happening that made things even harder. My parents got divorced when I was in middle school, and that was just really hard, obviously, for anyone that goes through it. And a lot of my relationship with my family, it was just skewed, and I didn't know where to turn, or like I felt like I had to pick sides, and it was really hard. And then not long after that, Not long after that, my mama passed away. She was my person. She would pick me up from school and practices and take care of us when we got in school. And it was something, I mentioned I had anxiety as a kid. And I remember literally just going out to eat one night with my mama and papa, and like being so like fearful and upset. Thank you. I don't know why I didn't bring these up. I knew this would happen. And they were just like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm so scared of you all like passing away. Like, I'm so scared." And I was little when that specific interaction happened. And so having to like actually face that reality, it was really hard. And so those things, along with this battle in my mind that was already happening, was really hard. And I experienced a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and I'd started counseling around the time that I started dealing with intrusive thoughts, and I kind of stopped going after my mom had passed away because life just got really hectic, and wasn't the best decision, but it's just what kind of gradually happened. But that was really a vital turning point in life in terms of darkness and experiencing darkness. And so middle school, really, best way I could explain it was just I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to make it through, and it was hard there because of what was happening in my mind. I was scared to go do certain things, scared to interact with certain people. It affected all these decisions that I made in my life and the way that I lived my life, and I just felt like I was constantly living in fear, and that was really hard. And so I faced that really the majority of my middle school here, and then moving into high school, I feel like I can remember my freshman year being kind of this like point of ease for me. I was still in church, and but I was making new friends and still playing. I played sports my whole life. I did like everything, and so I was still doing all that, and so I had friendship and relationship there, and things had felt better for a while. I guess I was kind of adjusting at that point to all that had happened, and so things had kind of settled down freshman year, but then moving into sophomore and junior year, things started to kind of change again. Sophomore year was really anxiety ridden. I think I used to be, I still kind of am, but I've gotten better. I'm a perfectionist, and so when it came to school, I wanted to do everything right. I wanted to get all the good grades. I graduated as valedictorian, and looking back, I'm like, cool, like whatever. But I was just like, I worked so hard, and I put so much pressure on myself when I didn't need to, and this caused a lot of anxiety. I can't remember if it was sophomore or junior year, but during one of those times, I had my first anxiety attack, which was really a scary experience. I didn't know what was happening. I was at the house by myself, and it was really scary. And I don't remember if it was that point or later on that I was eventually medicated for anxiety, but that was a really scary experience. And I remember sometimes I would stress out so much about school or just life in general. I started to scratch. Anxiety took its form, and I would scratch, and sometimes I would scratch until I would bleed. And then later on, it would just be I would scratch and my skin would start to welt up. But that's how anxiety kind of took its form in that season of my life. And I didn't really pay attention to it because it's just what it was, I guess. It's just what I was feeling and experiencing. But looking back, I can recognize what that was. And it was hard. And then junior year, I'd kind of, at some point between sophomore and junior year, again, I kind of fell out of church. And just kind of stopped really putting effort or giving attention to my relationship with God or the calling that God had placed on my life. And I decided instead of doing that, I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to have friends that I hadn't had before, and I wanted to experience life in a different way, I guess. And so junior year, I got a friend group that I didn't need to have. But I made some friends, and they were not good for me, for many reasons. But for one, they joked a lot about what was specifically happening in my mind, this war that I was battling in my mind with sexuality and things like that. And so they would make jokes about it, and eventually I just started making jokes about it, and it turned into a lot of different things that I didn't need to turn into. And I never, I guess, in my mind, I guess in the time I wasn't really giving into those thoughts and those lies that I was having, but in a way I was, because I was still feeding them and I was still giving them power over me. And so I stepped into those friendships, and it eventually just crumbled completely, and rumors got spread about me. There was a lot of miscommunication, and really all the friends that I had, I lost, which looking back, I needed to. But that was hard, and knowing what was going on in my mind and knowing the situations that had happened, I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame in what I was doing. I was embarrassed, and I didn't really know what to do, but this situation brought me back to church. And I was going back to church, but I still wasn't, fully committed. I was just kind of going, and I just didn't want to be experiencing what I was experiencing anymore. And so I got back in church for a little while, and then moving into senior year, I again made the decision that I wanted people more than I wanted God. and I got in a relationship with this boy, and I think looking back, it was just a way, just like all the other friendships that I had before that, it was just a way to fill this God-shaped hole in my life. And so I got in this relationship, and I'm trying to maneuver through what I'm going to do after high school, and Trevecca was my first option, but the money didn't work out, and I was going to play basketball there after high school, but it just didn't work out, and so that was frustrating too. But I was also at this point where I was kind of committed to my relationship, and I was kind of scared to move away because of that. If I would have had the opportunity to leave, I think I still would have, but that's just not what happened. But in this relationship, I became a version of myself that I never imagined I would be. And I fell into a lot of sexual sin, and I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done, and made a lot of decisions that I wish I didn't make. But also within that relationship, it was very coercive, and he was very coercive towards me in regards to those things. And so I didn't realize the extent of it in the middle of the relationship, or how serious what he was doing was, until after we had broken up, and I realized it. But it was really harmful, and it hurt me in a lot of ways, and it broke me in a lot of ways. And after we had broke up, I still wasn't going where I needed to go in terms of my relationship with God. I still wasn't looking to Him. I was still looking to people and to other things, and I eventually developed addiction to pornography, and that was hard to shake, and that was a really, really dark place. And even in the midst of that, after we had broken up, I kind of developed this addiction and these desires for things that God didn't want for me, and I was just kind of pushing God away. And we'd broken up the summer after I graduated high school, and I'd went to church camp that summer, and things kind of shifted a little bit, but not enough. I mean, God moved, and God did what He wanted to do, but I didn't accept what He was doing, and I didn't follow Him the way that I needed to. And I started talking to another guy who loved the Lord, and I thought I saw a future with him. But then the day before I started community college, he just cut it off. And that hurt, and that really stunk really bad. But looking back, it was what needed to happen, because I wasn't in the place I needed to be. I was better, I guess you could say, than I was when I was in the other relationship, but I still wasn't where I needed to be. I was still struggling with addiction and desires, and my focus wasn't where it needed to be. And continuing on into I went to community college after high school, just a place close to where I lived. And throughout those 2 years, I was still struggling with addiction. That's when COVID hit. So being isolated didn't help anything. And I'd started a job. I'd made some friends there. And again, and I'm not blaming COVID, but it just didn't help. but it was just like being in that season of life, experiencing this pandemic, and still dealing with addiction and all these things. I just never got focused where I needed to be focused. And I made some friends at the place I worked at and got close with them. And Believe it or not, they weren't good for me either. And the things that they believed and their morals didn't really line up with my morals in a lot of ways, but then again, my morals weren't really lining up with my morals either. And it wasn't, there were good moments, but majority of it, I was just falling deeper and deeper into things I didn't need to be. I was still feeding these things that were happening in my mind and feeding these habits and these addictions that I created. And I continued to lean on people before I leaned on Jesus. And it destroyed me. And a lot happened in those friendships too, a lot more drama, very similar to what I experienced in high school, which was hard. And but God was doing what he wanted to do, and he was taking people out of my life that needed to be taken out of my life, and I didn't like it, but it's what needed to happen. And looking back, I'm glad that it happened the way that it did. But and in this time when I was in community college, I was still going to church, but again, I was still facing all these things and really just putting on a front, and just not fully surrendering the way that I needed to fully surrender. And I would lay things down sometimes, but I'd just pick them right back up. And so I just wasn't fully surrendered. But when I had these friends, I would invite them to church, even though we weren't living the way we needed to be living. And but even now, one of my friends started coming to church with me, and then even after I left, she invited her family to church, and now they go to that church. And so it's really cool to see how even in my disobedience and even in my mistakes and all the things and the unhealthy relationships that I had, God still moved, and God still did really cool things in the midst of that. But when I lost all those friendships, it was really close to when I was about to move away to college, to go to Trevecca. God made a way in that. That's another thing. He made a way, even though I was really being disobedient and I wasn't fully committed the way I needed to be fully committed. He made a way for me to go to Trevecca. And when it came down to it, it was $0 down for me to be able to go. And it was just purely a God thing. I can't really explain it other than that. And so I was getting ready to move, and I lost all these friendships, and I was really distraught and confused because it was hard to think about leaving my friends and leaving my family. And then God just stripped these friends from me, but it's what needed to happen. And then he was faithful, and he provided people with me for the short period of time before I left, and he strengthened relationships in my family. And because I had kind of pushed away the people that mattered in my life when I had those friendships. And that's something I still look back and I'm like, oh man, that really stinks that I did that. But God restored that. Even if it was for a little bit, he restored that. And I'm super thankful for that. And so going to Trevecca, again, I mean, even just the little bit before I was about to move and then moving in, God was doing a work in me that I just didn't realize he was doing. And I was still struggling, and I was still confused. And the first little bit that I was there, it was really lonely, and it was really weird. And I've never moved before in my life. And so, and I was also transferring in, so I was a junior. And so all the people that were coming in were freshmen, and I'm like, I feel so old, and I just didn't really know how to make friends. And so the first little bit was hard, and it was confusing, and I was still battling addiction, really, and trying to fight that off, and trying to fight off desires that didn't align with God and who he's called me to be. But God provided, and he met me where I was, and he gave me friendships. He gave me a best friend that I never imagined I would ever have. And that specific friendship has grown me and helped me in ways that I never imagined was possible. she's one of the people that knows the full extent of my story, and one of the first people, aside from like my mom and my therapist, that I was able to just openly say these things to, which I never imagined I could do. And that gave me that grew me so much. And interacting with all these other people at this place who love Jesus, and that pushed me to be a better version of myself, and having professors that taught me how to have a relationship with Jesus and how to study the Word, and gave me opportunities to lead and grow in my calling of worship. And God did so much, looking back on the 2 years that I was there, and he gave me so much, and he redeemed so much. And I stumbled and I fell a lot, but he was still faithful, and he still made a way. And all these things that I've just told you, I was kind of thinking about it today, and I was like, when I moved, gradually it was like God was revealing all these things that I've ever been through and experienced, and he was like, I'm doing a work in all of these things, and I'm healing you in all these things. And something that has always been really hard for me to come to terms with, and really confusing for me, but it's something that always comes back when I think about my story, and when I see the lives of other people too. And it's two specific things, and those things are healing and identity. Those are two things that I have been fought with, that the enemy has attacked over and over and over, things that I'm still learning about and experiencing. But I bring that up because my view of those things was so skewed, and so that I was just confused about it, because I'd heard so many different things. And going to different churches in Nashville, I went to a church for a little while, and they were a more charismatic church, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get mad at me or anything. I promise I'm not judging them. It's just some things that they taught, and the way that they kind of said certain things, it just didn't sit right with me personally, and in my spirit, and the way that they explained healing. And I went to another church that I interned at, actually, and they, because of these things that I've dealt with in my mind for so long, and I feel like I've asked and asked and asked God to take them from me and to heal me. And so I've still struggled with them. And so I have always been confused of why am I not healed? And I went to this other church, and they kind of made me feel like if to be like healed or delivered, it had to be like ritualistic, and you had to do certain things to be able to be truly healed or delivered. And the other church that I just mentioned, I kind of felt like the only way to be healed in that way was if you had like this physical experience, like this physical feeling of the Spirit or of Jesus, or automatically experienced healing in a second. And so in my mind, that's what healing looked like. And so for me to hear those things and experience the way that people were teaching it, and me not experiencing healing in that way, I was confused and I was hurt. And I battled with the concept of healing for so long, and identity obviously has been a point of attack my whole life. And I've always struggled to fully understand my identity in Christ, and to fully understand who he says I am. And just because of my circumstances and because of the things that I've been through, I've put them before the truth, essentially. And so I've fought that battle with healing, and I fought that battle with identity. And it's always been these things that have been so confusing for me. And I've just always had a hard time hearing and understanding the truth of them. And this past year, I feel like God has shown me so much in regards to these two specific things, because it's so relevant to my story and really to all of our stories. And I'm really thankful for the way that he's been working on me in it, and I still have a lot to learn. I'm still growing and trying to figure things out and all the things, but the Lord is faithful, and he's been showing me this. And this specific story that I'm about to read you all, I did a senior worship service for when I was at school. That was like my senior project, I guess you could say. So I just put together a whole worship service, and I gave a message during that. I chose to give a message during that, and this was the passage that I used, and this is what I talked about. And so I want to just talk about that more. And I think really if I ever share my story again, whenever I do, I might always bring this up unless God tells me not to, but because it's just so beautiful, first of all, but it's just so relevant to each and every one of us when we really dig into it. And so I'm just going to kind of touch on the things that I gave in the message before. And if you ever want to hear the full message, come to me and I can get it to you. Because I truly believe that this is a word that the Lord gave me. And I believe it's something that everyone needs to hear. And it's a really beautiful story. And when you dig into it, it's so cool. So we're just going to go ahead and get into it. And if you have a Bible and you want to turn, you can. If not, it should be up here in a second. But we're going to be in Mark 5. And this is the story of the woman with the issue of blood, if you have ever heard it before. And starting in verse 25, it says, a large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and with trembling and with fear told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." I'm sorry, it gets me every time. It's just such a beautiful thing. And if you've ever watched The Chosen, or if you haven't, this scene, oh man, it's so beautiful. But this is a story of healing and identity. And this is a story that has changed my life. And there's a couple things that I just want to touch on in this. First of all, let's talk about her identity. This woman was given her identity by her circumstances. And it was given to her by people who could only see her circumstances. She had this disease of bleeding, of hemorrhaging, and in this time, she was considered unclean. And to be deemed unclean during this time was really intense. You couldn't touch other people without them becoming unclean. You really couldn't be seen in public without getting harassed. So I'm sure she was very alone and very isolated in what she was experiencing, because she had been identified as being unclean. And she found her identity in her circumstances, because that's all she'd ever heard and that's all she'd ever experienced. And so she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had. And instead of getting better, she grew worse. Boy, have I done that. She looked to everything else. She tried to find healing everywhere else. But it just made her worse. But thank the Lord that she found out about Jesus. And she heard of Jesus, and she heard of what he had done. And she immediately knew, he can heal me. All she had to do was touch his clothes. That's what she believed. And so she came to Jesus. She came to Jesus in her brokenness. She came to Jesus with this idea of this identity that she had been given by others and by what she had heard. She came to him with all of it, and she came to him with a faith that was unwavering. And that is something I want us to remember, is that word faith. She was weighed down and identified by lies and by her disease, but Jesus didn't see her in this way. And here it says immediately she was healed. And Jesus felt power go out of him, and he knew who touched him. He knew, but he wanted her to come. And he said, "Who touched me?" And so the woman comes with fear and trembling. And I can't think of how many times I've done that, or how many times I've stayed away from Jesus because I'm scared, because I'm fearful, because I'm scared he's going to judge me, because everyone else has. But she came to him with fear and trembling, and even though she felt that, she laid it all out there. And there's not a time limit here. It says, one second, told him the whole truth. There's not a time limit. And so she could have been there for hours just telling Jesus about her life. And he listened. But it might have just been this one moment. But no matter what, she fell at his feet. She laid it all out there, even in her fear. And she said, I just wanted you, and I believed you could heal me. And in that moment, Jesus saw her faith, and he addressed her by her true identity. Daughter. There's so much power in that, friends. I can't tell you how many times I look at my circumstances, and I've looked at the things that I go through, and I look at the things that happen in my head, and that's going through my head, and the things that have happened in my life, and I find my identity and my worth in those things. And I didn't even realize it until I did a study this summer, but I made my circumstances an idol. I made my struggles an idol. And I put them before Jesus. And I found my identity in them, and I put so much focus and so much obsession on them, and I was trying to figure it all out, and I was trying to fix it. I was trying to find hope and healing everywhere else and in everyone else, but I couldn't do it. Because only he can. And my true identity is only found in him. And your true identity is only found in him. And your circumstances, friends, they do not define you. They never have, they never will. This woman was diseased. But in the eyes of the Lord, that was never her identity. She just had to come to Jesus to realize the truth of it. It was the healing power that came through Jesus when she touched his clothes that healed her disease, but it was her faith. Right here, daughter, Your faith has healed you. She believed automatically when she heard about Jesus, he can heal me. And she brought everything to him because of that faith, because of that belief. And she was healed. And I want us to pay attention to this. What comes next after it says your faith has healed you? It says, go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Be freed. And in the NRSV, I love the wording there. And in the NRSV, it says, go and be healed. Because she was healed right then and there. I believe that we serve a God that when we ask to be healed, he heals us. I don't believe it all looks the same. Right here, it was instant. But it's not always instant. Sometimes it's instant. Sometimes it's gradual. Sometimes our healing doesn't even look like healing. But I believe that when we ask, we receive, and he delivers. This command that he gave her after she was healed. I mentioned earlier that I've always asked Jesus to take things from me. And I've always laid things down and then felt like nothing changed. I don't want to say I never, but I've struggled to believe that I've been healed when I fully have been. Just because you struggle with something does not disregard your healing. And I've asked the question too. This is a fully loaded question, but I just want to bring it up. If this woman were to bleed again, I don't think it discounts her healing. Our healing looks different. It doesn't always look the same. But when we ask, first of all, we have to come with faith. We have to believe that he is the healer and he will heal us when we ask. And when we ask, when we touch the hem of his garment and we're healed, and he tells us, your faith has made you well. Go and be healed. Live as if you are healed. Healing is not this one-time thing, even if it looks instant. It's not a one-time thing, because healing is continual. I believe that when we're saved, the healing process starts. As believers and as faithful followers of Christ, we are healed, we're being healed, and we will be healed. It is this ongoing process. But it is up to us to believe that. It's up to us to go and live as if we are healed. Because not only does that change our circumstances, but when we live that life, people see it. And people come to know Jesus because of the way that we present ourselves. We don't even have to say his name every time. If we just live in alignment with the truth of Christ and the truth of our identity in him and the truth that we are healed and we are delivered because we are his, it changes everything. It changes us. It changes others. We can't be identified by our past, our circumstances, by what others say or think, by the lies of the enemy, and the things that he wants us to believe. Our only hope is in Jesus. And we must lay it all down. And once we do that, First, we must come to him with faith and belief and lay it all down. And then once we do that, walk away believing that God has done a good work in us, and he will continue to do a good work in us. We must live in this reality of our true healing and identity so that others can come to know Christ and be a part of this kingdom as we are. Lord's speaking to me tonight. I've thought about this over and over, and these words that he's given me over and over. I'll tell you, this takes work. Faith is hard. It's not easy. And I'll just be completely transparent and honest about this season of life that I'm in. Moving here, there's been a lot of good things, and I'm experiencing a lot of cool things, and I get to do what I love and get to do what I'm called to do. But it's hard. I left everything I ever knew again, and I don't have the people that I have done life with for the past 2 years with me, and I have to watch my family and my friends live their lives and experience new things and create new relationships. And really, I've felt alone. And I have let all these feelings and concerns and worries and thoughts and obsessiveness consume me. And I've been angry at God. This has been a really intense season in a small amount of time. It's been kind of crazy. But like I said, this is for a reason. And sometimes I have to hear my story again and be reminded of the things that he's done. And remember that he's faithful, and remember that he's healed me and he's healing me. But I've put all these circumstances before him and all these worries and concerns and desires before him. And I've let them consume me, and I've asked him, God, why? Why am I feeling all this? Why am I experiencing all this? I just want to feel okay. I just hear him say, just lay it down. Just come before me and lay it down. Let me have it. And then go. Go, be free. Because there's freedom that he is so graciously just extending to us. We just have to take it and walk faithfully in it. And like I said, that's hard. But what a beautiful thing when we when we're able to do that. When we're able to trust him fully, when we're able to believe in our healing and know our identity in him and him alone, and want him above everything else, no matter what our circumstances may look like, no matter what our healing looks like in this season of life. To just come before him and know and believe that he's healed us, he's healing us, and he will heal us. I just want us to take 10 more minutes, if y'all don't care. I'm going to sing this song that has played a really big role in my life and in my story, and has helped me understand more about what healing and deliverance means, and to know that God is doing a good work and he's making something beautiful out of me. That's what these lyrics are going to say. And so I just want us to take this time to reflect on our own lives and our own stories. And if you have anything that you need to lay down, if you have anything that you need healing from, just pray and come before him and lay it down and just talk with him. Come to him with faith, lay it all down, and then believe that you're healed, and believe that he loves you, and believe the identity that you have in him and not anything else, because nothing else matters. And so if you want to stay in your seats and reflect, can we turn this mic on? Got it? If you want to come to the altar, kneel at your seat, whatever it is that you feel you need to do in this moment in time, I just want you guys to come and be healed, and then go and be healed. Thank you guys for listening and being receptive to my story, and I hope it's impactful in some way. But I'm just thankful for this opportunity, and I just want us to have the opportunity to respond and be with God for a little bit. And so we'll just take this time, and then we'll be dismissed. I lean not nothing I hold on to, nothing I hold on to. There's 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 nothing I hold on to. You can have it all. There's nothing I hold on to. 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 And I give it all to you, God, trusting that you'll make something beautiful out of me. Yes, I give it all to you, God, trusting that you'll make something beautiful out of me. Lord, we thank you for this day, for this opportunity to just come before you and lay it all down and know the truth of who you see us as, Lord, and the truth that we are healed when we believe in you, Lord. And I just pray that we would all take something when we leave this place tonight, and we would go out, we would live as if we are healed, Lord, because we are. We wouldn't let our circumstances or other people or even ourselves define us if it doesn't align with who you are, Lord, and who you say of us, Lord. And I just pray that you would just be with each and every one of us. Continue to speak to us. Continue to just lead us, Lord. Continue to heal us. And just help us and give us the strength and the wisdom and the guidance, Lord, to live as if we are healed. To live into this truth of all of our stories, Lord. And would others see you through us in that. Thank you for this day, for the life that you've given us, Lord. Protect us as we go. Be with us, Lord. And give us all to you. And it's in Jesus' name.